For people who haven't listened to Beartooth, but the last songs on all the Beartooth records, they're always just kind of like a distillation of exactly what the record really means and what I'm truly feeling. They're generally speaking incredibly sad for every record prior, but for this record it's completely different.
Hi, I'm Alia, and I'm joined by Caleb Shomo from Beartooth for the latest in Enemies in Conversation series. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you doing?
Good. How have you've just done a couple of festival dates in Europe. How have they been?
They have been outstanding. Yeah, we've been out for about 3 weeks, just going all over the place, just rocking as hard as we can.
And how have the new songs been going over live?
They've been going really well. We've been playing the 3 new ones that have all been out off the new record so far. And way better than I could have imagined. I mean, to be honest, I feel like they've been getting the best response of any songs in the set, so that's got to be a good sign.
We're here today to talk about your new album, The Surface, which is out on October 13th. I know you've done like some planning ahead of time. How much had you like sort of planned out and how far in advance?
It kind of depends. So I had like the title of the record, I've had the title down for probably like 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. I don't know. I like to kind of like have the whole thing kind of laid out as far as ahead as I can. But to be fair, the subject matter of the record didn't really come up until it just kind of happened. So, the main thing I knew I wanted after I finished the previous album Below was I wanted The Surface to just be the polar opposite in every way, shape, and form. And I kind of at least vowed to myself that Below would be like the darkest, kind of saddest record I ever make in my life, because it was pretty intense. So after that, it was about a 1.5 year kind of process of writing all the songs, and it really just sort of like revealed itself over that 1.5 years.
And what made you choose The Surface as the title?
I mean, really, so like our first 5 albums, and I guess the EP are all kind of like one run-on sentence in succession, but it's sick, disgusting, aggressive disease below the surface, which to me is really the story of like what they're all about, which is me dealing with what it means to feel depressed and anxious and like the things that I kind of deal with and some of the way my chemicals fire, So The Surface was just the way it ended, and kind of like, to me, all I knew is I really wanted it to be me bringing some new things to the surface in my own life. And yeah, thankfully those ended up being some pretty cool things.
Like you just mentioned that your work has always sort of really delved into like your experiences with mental health, and you haven't been like, you don't shy away from talking about the really difficult parts of that. But on this album, you have a more like positive outlook. What kind of sparked that shift?
I mean, honestly, the pandemic, like for most people, it was a really intense emotional period in both directions. And so, Below was like the period piece of being in the depth of it. And yeah, it was pretty sad. And I had a really hard time, as I'm sure most of us did. That being said, though, I don't know, I kind of hit this point where I just realized with my life I had 2 very distinct paths in front of me. It was continue on, living a very unhealthy, unloving, self-destructive life, and who knows how long that lasts, probably not very. And even if it does last, it's going to be really painful and unfulfilling and difficult. Or I got to kind of look myself in the eyes and make some very tough choices, but choices that are going to just be practical to make my life a little bit better and a little bit happier. Some of those being just taking control of my mental health, which is something I've always dealt with. As you said, I've covered that for 4 records in an EP now, and it hasn't all been great. But I mean, just like for most people, the pandemic, coming out of that, I just felt like I had to do something different and take advantage of the life that I've still been given. Because when you kind of get a massive part of that taken away, and for myself and for you know, the entire music community, the live show was gone. And even putting out records and doing things that we do the same way, it was just completely changed. So yeah, that really sparked a shift. And I was like, life is short. I want to make the most of it,
And when you when it came to writing the lyrics, was it sort of challenging to like translate that outlook into the lyrics?
I mean, I think I took a bit of a different approach with The Surface. Lyrically, I really wanted to focus on the song as a whole. And what I mean by that is like the lyrics and the song as in, what am I trying to say? Like, what does this mean? For most of the earlier stuff, almost all of it, my process was kind of like I would write the music first, and then I'd kind of write lyric and melody to that, and then go back to the music and kind of adjust it to the lyric and melody, then maybe go back and forth, whatever, until it was done. But for this record, the main thing was, what am I trying to say? What am I really trying to get across? And I would make sure that was at the forefront of everything, and then the lyric and melody was written first, and the music kind of came after that. And then so that shift really just made, like, I don't know, the songwriting process feel a lot more focused, and just more focused on what am I trying to say, and that made for a little bit of a different experience.
And then how did that like sort of more positive outlook impact the music writing?
It's wild after so long of writing really sad songs to like have this kind of canvas to work around, which is for the most part, pretty like uplifting lyrics, and like I'm really focused on hope and forward thinking and just a lot of new things in my life. So I think it made the music process just different, not necessarily easier, but a lot more satisfying at the end of the day. I mean, I went through some crazy periods making this record, specifically with the music. I mean, there was a while where I had kind of most of the songs, the lyrics, the melody, what it's about, written. And yeah, I went through this whole soul searching, like, what am I doing? How do I translate this thing for a few months? But at the end of the day, when it all came together, and I just realized, like, just quit overthinking it and just do what you got to do. It was really fun. And I kind of tried to strip the fear away of what fits in a Beartooth song, what doesn't fit in a Beartooth song, and just write music that serves the lyric in the song. So yeah, it was cool.
And your most recent single is Might Love Myself. How did that sort of come together?
I was listening to a lot of Ariana Grande.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's all just like super empowering. And I mean, she's just rad. And those songs are crazy good on another level of like songwriting and the vibe. And this whole record, like self-empowerment is a massive, massive part of it. That song was really just about like the moment that I understood that I was starting to feel self-love for the first time, like truly. Which is a very overwhelming experience. So I don't know. Shout out to Ariana. You're rad. And you're empowering as hell. And yeah, I don't know. It just kind of happened. I was like in that groove, and I remember just listening to one of her records while I was walking to get coffee. And I was just really vibing on a groove. And then like the whole thing just happened when I got back to my studio, and the lyrics just came, and the melody and it all. And I remember just kind of like putting some chords down just to record over, and just hit record, and it went. And then, yeah, that was it. Kind of like first draft of the chorus was the chorus, and then I just built around it. But yeah, I mean, like feeling self-love and being able to write about it and like capture that kind of moment all at once was very special. And I think it made for a pretty special song.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, because I feel like even on Below and on this album too, there's a lot of pop influence. I know on Riptide you had a lot of pop influence.
Absolutely.
Were there any other like sort of pop artists who influenced the album?
For sure. NSYNC, way up there. NSYNC rules. I mean, Britney, I don't know. I mean, the list goes on. One Direction, huge one. I've always loved pop. I think that like pop writing when it's done well, is just some of the most impressive stuff to me. Like a really, really good hook, great lyric, great melody. It's just pretty mind blowing when it all comes together, in my opinion. So yeah, I wanted to like let that part of me out more. I mean, that's been around since the beginning of Beartooth. I mean, I think that's what I guess makes the choruses what they are. People have always, talked about the choruses in Beartooth, but I think it's just because, yeah, pop has been such a big influence on me in my life for a very long time. So it's bled out. But with this record, I wanted to just be a bit more fearless in what I was doing and more focused. And yeah, it's like just let the pop out, just let it go.
It's still a heavy record, though. I feel like there's a lot of like moments of real heaviness sitting alongside moments of like real lightness, like Sunshine.
Yeah.
Was it like there any concern about like stitching those together, kind of?
I mean, yeah, at first. I mean, it was when the record started writing itself, or when I started writing it, it started writing itself, whatever happened. Riptide was like the first one, and then Sunshine was actually the second song I wrote. And that song is very specifically about just being stuck and like wanting to get out of that and experiencing what that feels like, that in the middle of this gigantic shift in my life. Yeah, I wanted the music to kind of like capture that, and it just sort of happened. The chorus, I wrote the chorus first, and then like, the verses, like the lyrics all came after. But musically, I thought the only way was to just go completely all out in those moments and how I was feeling. So like, it's kind of written from two perspectives. I wrote the song in Los Angeles, which is where I live now, but I've lived, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, which has notably horrific winters. And I am not a big fan of the winter anymore. And yeah, so like the verses are supposed to feel like kind of something from Beartooth's first album, when I was like stuck in this, cold basement in Columbus, like trying to explore my, depression and what that feels like and what that means. And then I wanted the choruses and all that to feel like the brightness of when I landed in California after I decided to move there, and, this like complete eye-opening experience of like, okay, so like seasonal depression is something I can kind of control, and like but it's going to take a big painful move. So yeah, that long-winded response is how Sunshine is what it is.
Well, actually, I think one of the things that is so great about the lyrics on that record is that it's not just like, it really talks about sort of, even though there's a positive outlook, like how much you need, like how much effort it takes into like, being happy and loving yourself. Did it feel sort of like cathartic to write those lyrics?
Incredibly. It's always a cathartic experience to write Beartooth records with whatever kind of viewpoint they're from. Some obviously being more painful than others. But, I mean, making this record truly, I mean, it's just something I never thought was going to happen in my life, candidly. I've talked about it in other albums. I've talked about it pretty openly in interviews. Like my kind of the dark side of what I deal with sometimes, I felt like has always been at the forefront and been the most powerful energy in my life. So to like learn, like you said, like how to kind of put the effort in to be able to control that and deal with it. It just made for a really, really empowering experience making this record. Most of the time, I'd finish a song and be listening to it, and I was like, I cannot believe I wrote this. And I don't know. I mean, Beartooth is like the most intimate experience that I have with music. It is really, Beartooth and me are just kind of one thing, and it's just me talking about exactly what I'm going through with no filters at that moment. So to have 11 songs that are like all this story about either wanting to learn to be happier and put in the effort to, deal with mental health or physical health or whatever it may be, to have all of this in front of me, at the end of the day, I look at that experience and it's going to be, I mean, probably the most one of the most important experiences I will ever have, because it really like laid the foundation for me deciding that I'm going to put in the effort for the rest of my life to try and live happier and make the most of what I got, and just deal with the things that I'm going to deal with forever, which is, depression, anxiety, the things I've always talked about. But I do believe there's a way that I can have those things in my life, but have a better toolkit to deal with them. And yeah, so the whole writing process really like brought that up.
I also wanted to ask how you landed on the pink aesthetic for the album.
It was the vibe. I mean, I don't know. There was a few things. So for one, Below was like this really deep, dark, like purple, and it was just so brutal and sad and gruesome. So I was like, all right, let's go with this really bright, loud pink. And also, I just remember one of the first days I was working in Los Angeles before I moved there. I mean, there was just the most beautiful, really bright pink sunset. And yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of like a no-brainer. I was like, this has to be it. Like, just the most obviously, like, good vibes, like, happy. I just want it to be completely different than anything else I've done before, And, yeah, pink was the color.
Are there any songs on the record that you're really excited for people to hear or you're really proud of?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, so many. I don't know. I'm excited for people to hear like the twists and turns. The Better Me is a song that I am incredibly proud of. And the way it ended up, with being a feature with Hardy is wild. I've never done a feature before on my record. Like no one's ever. It's always just been all me. And I mean, the songwriting process of that was all me, but I mean, when he laid his vocal down, it completely changed the energy of the whole thing. So I'm very excited for people to hear that. The thing I'm most excited about is the end of the album. For people who haven't listened to Beartooth, and go listen to them if you want. They're not going to make you feel good. But the last songs on all the Beartooth records, they're always just kind of like a distillation of exactly what the record really means and what I'm truly feeling. And yeah, they're generally speaking incredibly sad for every record prior. But for this record, it's completely different. Like I didn't want to do that again, and it just wasn't. It wouldn't have made sense. So yeah, I just kind of like skipped the part of doing that really, really sad, brutal ending, and just left it at kind of the most positive and hopeful song that I've ever written in my career. And that is really, really exciting for me.
Are there any songs that you think are going to surprise listeners?
So many. My goodness. From the get-go. I mean, yeah, I think The Better Me is definitely going to be a surprise. I mean, if people haven't heard it yet, Might Love Myself is definitely a bit of a departure for us. Look the Other Way is definitely a bit of a surprise, having more of kind of like a stripped-down, like acoustic song in the middle of the album. That's very different for Beartooth. My New Reality is a completely different vibe. I worked with a guy named Story who does mostly, pop and hip hop. And yeah, we like really dove into that, and then I kind of flipped it into a Beartooth song. But yeah, that's a way different flavor. I mean, the ending I think is a way different flavor. Almost the whole record, other than maybe like track 1, is pretty different. Yeah.
My New Reality is really interesting because I feel like that one starts off kind of like more pop leaning and gets like progressively heavier as it goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah, that song was really, really cool. And so the important thing for me at the ending of the record is that it is me like really manifesting a new reality for myself. And, for lack of a better term, and to be extra corny. But that song specifically, that's why I wanted to work with somebody who is in the hip hop world, because that is so like, I am the shit. And like, that's where you come from when you write those songs. And I've never in my life written a song from that place. So it was cool to work with a lyricist on, we'd kind of come up with ideas and I'd try and say something. He's like, no, that's not how you say that. And like, there's a way cooler way to say that, and like how to deliver it. And it really ended up being something super special, way different for a record. And yeah, it's just all about empowerment. And I found a lot of empowerment working with somebody else who's like, you know, that's kind of like what their career is more built on. And I'm here for it. It was rad.
And you're coming up on 10 years of Beartooth being a band.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
What are your goals for the next 10 years?
I mean, the main goal is just be present in what's going on. I think it's been very tough to do that sometimes, but to me, that's just what I want to happen. You know, wherever we go or whatever we do, like I have ambitions, and I think we're going to do some really cool shows, and we already have, and we've done stuff crazier than I could have even imagined. But for the most part, I just want to be there while it's happening. It's so easy to look at until we achieve this thing, until we headline this festival, this show, this whatever, sell this many records, then I'll be happy. It's so easy to get lost while that's happening. And I mean, I can say I've played, I think over like nearly 2,000 shows in my career or something. And I have not been there for all of them. A lot of them they're done. And I'm like, what just happened? Even, I've had really big, important shows that I barely even remember because I had so much stress. I was thinking about other things. I was thinking about the future. I was so worried about the past, whatever it may be. So like, my main goal for the next 10 years is to just be present when I'm on stage, just experience the whole Beartooth thing as it happens, and just try and have like a really good memory of it. And, but yeah, who knows what happens? I really don't know. I mean, usually it's been about every 2 years I make a record, and they all seem to be pretty wildly different. So we'll see what happens in 2 years. But as long as I'm happy and I'm present, then I'll be content with whatever I'm doing.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been awesome.